Reputation sits alongside spaceships, components, weapons, apartments, and your UEC as progression in Star Citizen. Reputation is supposed to make things a little less good versus evil and a little more what are you willing to do to make some more money. But it's also supposed to gate a lot of the stuff that you're supposed to get. So like we can already see reputation gating missions in the Nix system. But you're also supposed to get certain ships because of your reputation. You're supposed to get certain components because of reputation. You're also supposed to be not allowed to go to certain places. In fact, one of the coolest things I had heard early on with the reputation system was every time you went to a city, you would have to turn in your weapons at customs. But if you had the reputation you needed to bring a weapon into the city, then you were able to use it because you passed that restriction. But if you did something with the gun, obviously, that would get you in trouble. It would hit you way harder because you have that reputation to lose. And I think between death and money and ships and reputation, they could do a lot to make people play the game different ways or take a little more responsibility for the things that they do. But there have been some questions lately. Suggestions that maybe you're not going to have as much negative consequences as opposed to positive consequences for your reputation with certain factions. That maybe the governments that you're working with won't actually be affected that much by it, but only specific factions that define a good versus bad balance in Star Citizen. And I think that has a lot of people worried. Now, we don't have the answer to that in this video, but what I'm going to do is we're going to go through everything that has been said, a lot of what's been said about reputation from Chris Roberts in the early days to the Inside Star Citizens of more recently, to what the devs were saying at CitizenCon, and ultimately the last couple of years culminating in the weird statements made this year. My goal is to just kind of explain what reputation is supposed to be and to get people hyped for it. And maybe get people to like, I don't know, tell CIG that we want this kind of stuff. You make your own call, but hopefully this does somewhat a good job of explaining it to you. Now we get to start off with Mr. Chris. Yes, of course. Like, why would we start anywhere else but Chris ranting for 3 minutes straight about his ideas for reputation? This is during 10 for the Chairman back in 2016. This was like peak feature creep time. This is when Star Citizen really got out of hand in terms of like what they wanted to add into the game. So it's good to keep in mind that like a lot of this stuff should be taken with a grain of salt, and much of it doesn't actually end up coming to fruition. But also it does give us an idea of like the direction they want to head in, the philosophy of the design of Star Citizen. So I'll let you listen to this guy tell you what he wanted to do, and we'll go from there.
But in reality, it really is, you have sort of personal reputations, and your organizations that you're members of will have reputations with other organizations and individuals. And so every time you come into contact with an organization or another individual, you sort of start kind of at a neutral status, unless a group, like for instance, if you're a member of the UEE and you meet a Vandal, well, we already know that the Vandal and the UEE are at loggerheads, therefore the Vandal will probably be, going after you.
Just because of reputation, though, if you had good reputation, then the Vandal definitely would not attack you.
But most of the time, just say players or player groups, the sort of reputation or kind of whatever you want to call it, alignment in terms of how you are versus the other player, gets tracked. So as you do something negative to them, it will go into sort of negative. You do something positive, go into positive, and we sort of keep a track of everyone you come into contact with, and track those relationships, as well as tracking the organization or the group relationships on the more global level. And of course, we have sort of whatever you want to call them, NPC or game organizations, like the UEE or the Vandal or the Merchants Guild, the Mercenaries Guild, all those kind of things that are sort of, kind of defined by us. But the reputation system will sort of be a combination of your personal reputation.
This guy's such a hand talker, it's crazy.
With various groups that you come into contact.
The energy
will be influenced by the groups you're a member of, that you publicly admit to being a member of, and we sort of track it as you do things and go from there. So it'll be fairly nuanced, and it'll allow players to kind of make their way in the galaxy and decide kind of, you know, who they're aligned with or who they aren't aligned with. And I think it'll be a lot more nuanced than, you know, good guy or bad guy, because in the world of Star Citizen, there really isn't going to be sort of a good guy and bad guy. I mean, you know, just even in the UEA Empire, there's a lot of different factions and interests that want different kinds of things, and you know, you could be aligned with one of them but not the other one, and that doesn't mean you're a bad guy. It just means you're on one side rather than the other one. Next question.
Sounds like Chris is a Xenothreat member. So that's a pretty standard, I would say kind of ambiguous description of the system. It's not necessarily, he didn't get into details. He didn't, I think, set them up for anything that they have to stick to, other than there will be factions and you can get reputation with them, and they will treat you differently based on their reputation. Now, that's mainly where we're headed. In fact, the idea that you would have a different reputation from the org you're in was something they talked about even at CitizenCon 2024. But that was 2016 Chris Roberts. Now, we're going to jump forward here about 5 years to, this is basically the big moment when reputation was brought into the game. In fact, let's go back to this time in, what was it, 21? Yeah. So reputation was added in December of 2020, but it was invisible. It was just like a background thing. It introduced the first iteration of persistent reputation between all entities within the Star Citizen universe, as well as persistent NPC organizations. This happened because only just a few patches ago, right here, we got persistence between updates. Before that, everything got wiped every 3 months. So after this, they then got they got the UI reputation into the game, and this was where they started to commit to more detailed ideas. It was still in design, and you'll notice from the way that a lot of the stuff is said in this episode of Inside Star Citizen, it was still very much we could do this, it could go that way, but it was definitely, they were getting more into the weeds and saying more things that were holding them to this version of us, where we go back and we watch all the stuff and we're like, where is this?
System that will essentially allow us to track values for a player's reputation with an entity. And when I say entity, that could be an NPC, an organization, heck, it could be a table if you want. So long as it has a persistent ID with it, we can track a value against it.
Still alive.
My tables hate me.
Not only can we track a value, we can track several values. Those values are in something that we call a scope. When we say scope, we're talking about two different things. There's affinity, which is this kind of measure of how much a entity likes you, and that's common across all these entities, NPCs, organizations, etc.
Hello.
A few different things affect affinity. It's going to be mostly your mission performance, and more specifically, actually, what you do during that mission. That's when affinity will really get big boosts. It is also worth noting that we can affect affinity through just your everyday action. For organizations, affinity is a little bit different in that it kind of represents the amalgamated opinion of that organization and its members towards you. It's going to control a lot of things like whether or not they want to attack you or help you, for instance. And then there's confidence/career. Confidence is exclusive to mission givers, and it kind of says how good they think you are at your job. Career is how an organization might be tracking that same value, how good you are at your job. The difference with an organization is that they can have several career scopes. So a security company like Crusader Security might have a bounty scope, but they also might have a defense scope or a jailer scope or any number.
This is what has mainly changed recently, and is what will be explained towards the end of this whole deep dive, I guess. They have removed this entirely. Companies themselves that act as governments will not be in the reputation system, and that's kind of where this whole topic of conversation is headed, but I'll let them keep explaining where reputation is going. This video is from 2021.
Of these career scopes that we want to track your different levels of career proficiency with different kinds of gameplay. Within scopes, we have this concept of standings. These are the ranks that you move through from negative whatever to positive whatever, and we can tell when we assess you, either through the missions or the mission givers or NPCs or however they are looking at you, what standing you are at. One of the things that we are very excited to have is these reputations giving you things when you get to those higher standings. The idea is that this is giving you benefits and rewards for progressing through the game. It's a progression system at its heart. The other thing that I'm really excited about with this coming out is the concept of allowing for group building and community building with this by allowing you to bring something unique to your group of friends table. You might have a reputation with a certain organization at a high level that your other friends don't, and you've maybe done a little bit of extra work to maintain that, get that up there, etc. And as a result, you're able to bring in something cool like a mission that normally they wouldn't be able to do. Plus, everybody likes bragging rights. We all know that you're going to be putting up screenshots on the subreddit or whatever saying, look at all these reputations I have at max.
Would love to.
Look at what I'm able to maintain, all that. We're darn excited about how that's going to play out potentially. So for this release, a lot of our focus is around missions and how that's going to be affecting things like your affinity and confidence. But going forward, you'll be having actions that affect your reputation of other kinds. So that's going to be things like a mission giver where you might push them, but it also could be like if you shoot at them, or if you shove one of their friends, or if you talk to them in the wrong way, if you choose a bad choice.
This is like the core of Star Citizen's narrative. I really hope that they stick to this.
It's in a conversation tree. It could be any number of things. We even have talked about some fun stuff where, like, Konstantin Herson, for instance, is a bit of a snob. You walk in wearing a bad coat or like some weird clothes, he might think less of you. You can also key it off of things like when you happen to raid a ship that is.
That's something that I realized is like in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Not that crazy of an idea for Sims and more immersive games like that.
Controlled by maybe Crusader security. We could key it off of something like you go into the wrong area. I mean, you just walk into a
believe he
club
still
where
works
the
here.
bouncer
Ben
doesn't want you
Dorsey.
to be there. We could key it off of you having the wrong decal on your ship, or flying in a way that a person doesn't really think that you're flying in a cool way, essentially. It's very open-ended.
Yeah, see, like, it's very open-ended. It is exciting. It makes you interested in where they could go with this in order to make progression a bigger deal in Star Citizen outside of just buying ships and earning money.
One of the things that we're really looking forward to is giving flavor to organizations by essentially playing with what they like and don't like. So there might be an organization that really likes it when you go around PvPing and killing other players. There might be organizations that frown on that a little bit. There might be organizations that really, really like it when you do piracy or smuggling or illegal acts, and there might also be some that aren't so okay with that. And that feel is going to allow us to bring a lot of the lore that up until now has existed on a website into the game so that you guys can actually experience it and get to know these people in the universe. And all that brings me to the topic of drift. Drift is the concept that over time your reputation might move up or down based on the mission giver organization, essentially moving towards neutral with you. Now, before you all get your torches and pitchforks out, the concept here isn't to enforce a horrifying grind or anything like that. We do want to reward you for gameplay that you already want to do on your own. But we do want to make sure also that these very high ends of reputation are things that take effort to get to and maintain.
Yeah, it should be decaying,
and by doing
of
that,
course.
we let people sort of be unique and interesting by saying, I want to make sure that I keep that one and that one at max. And
so I think this is mainly explained where they wanted to go with reputation, but you could tell that it was early in terms of its implementation, but they had plenty of ideas of how they could tie it in and make it interesting for players. This isn't even a new concept. It's in a lot of different games. Originally, when they talked about this kind of stuff, it was closely related with something they called virtual reality, and it was actually a system that was supposed to pretty closely align with the Nemesis system from the earlier Lord of the Rings games. Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of Mordor? Yeah. Something of Mordor and then Shadow of Mordor, I think. Whatever it was, you guys remember. It had that really cool Nemesis system where you could like get remembered by the AI. So we don't really know where that is yet, but the conversation around the whole system continued as they slowly they put reputation away. They dropped it into the game. It made a little bit of a difference with some of the mission givers, but just like with mission givers, it didn't get used really. It just kind of got left there for a while. And it wasn't until 2023 when we discovered that the mission team got saddled with Reputation because the team that was working on Reputation got moved on to something else. And it was then that you started to realize, like, maybe they're not working on this stuff because it has nothing to do with Squadron 42, so they've just given it to somebody else as an extra sort of thing. And they talk about Reputation V2, but we still don't have that. So let's take a look at like that whole, how that situation went down back in 2023. Shadow of War, that's right, thank you. All right.
In a recent monthly report, it states the team has now taken over Reputation. What are the plans for the near future with expanding Reputation for players in the game?
Okay. Yes, Reputation. Yeah, we've taken it over from USPU, and there's a few things that we're focusing on. And one of the most important parts we think we need to get out is reputation-based hostility. So we want it so that you can do missions for like the Ninetales in the verse, and when you do these missions, you gain reputation, and you can gain reputation to a point where you're allowed at their outposts because you're friends with them. You could be doing Siege of Horizon and they won't shoot you because they think you're friends. But then what needs to come pretty much at the same time or directly after that is a like sandbox reputation hooks. So these are things like, if I shoot Ed, my reputation with Luke.
Ed.
Yeah, you're right next to me. Listen,
it could be Jared.
If I shoot Jared, my reputation with the entire community goes down.
Apologize when you win.
I know, right? Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
But your reputation goes down. If you shoot Ninetales, your reputation would decrease with them, and if you keep shooting them, they're gonna start hating you. So even though you could start,
it's not just shooting. It could be
these destroying their ships really, or.
No, I only respond to being shot. Everything else you can do. You can curb stomp me, kick me while I'm down, freaking drop my face into horse feces. It's all the terrible stuff, dude. I'll take it. You're still my friend. But if you shoot me, we got a problem.
Yeah, we just want like ways
that
of
includes
going,
nerf.
Right, players done this. It's against
Mrs.
this
T.
faction, this reputation. So this reputation has allies of these people, so it's also going to a little bit affect them. But they're hated by these, so these people are going to get a positive outcome from your one action.
Yeah.
So we want to have. We're focusing on getting those because we think that's going to make the universe feel more alive and more influenced by your actions as a player. Especially like being able to do missions for Ninetales will allow criminal players to live that life.
Yeah, because I think that's why we chose not to do Reputation for Ninetales up till now, because it creates this problem where we go, yeah, but wait a minute, you do these missions for Ninetales and they're supposed to like you, yet you still get missions to murder them, and you can murder them all, and yet they still give you missions. And because there's no connection between those two things, it's where it all comes apart. Yeah. So we don't want to expose that obvious fault, but we want to after this.
This is a very important conversation. We're going to reference this later.
Particular feature work.
Reputation is a very important system to us.
Yeah, we know they're supposed to underpin everything, so, well, many things.
So there you go, Mike. Now stop asking.
And it is entirely possible to want to murder somebody that you like.
Yeah.
I've been in a relationship before.
Of course, you like them. They might not like you anymore, I suppose.
All right, so Ed, Elliot, thank you so much for hanging out, for taking the time.
All right, yeah, I think that was the end of that one. So that gives you a good idea of what they were thinking of Reputation. The hostility settings, I think, is like the biggest thing we could all think of. The idea that you could go and get better reputation with, I don't know, even like the way they talk about it here, it even sounds like you could get reputation with ASD and then go into the ASD facilities and not get attacked. But then I guess they start running into the actual game implications of that. Is like, does that mean those people can get the loot? How does that kind of stuff all work? So keep that one in your head. We're going to come back to this and talk a little bit more about what they say in this one specifically once we get to this talk that happened this year. But we'll keep going. And here is some stuff that they say about Reputation as they got closer and closer to the idea of putting this hostility into the game. How is this going to work with the actual implementation as opposed to just chatting on a show?
Like a bunker mission where I have to kill like security guards, I'll be less inclined to do it. But if it's shoot Ninetales and steal their stuff, then yeah, I'm all for it.
So the reputation ladder is going to be tied to these missions. A lot of players care about the reputation ladder themselves and completing that process. But as an extra incentive to climb it, they will unlock the harder tiers of this mission. And in the process of doing so, there will be more data pads that can drop across the mission. It will be more difficult to stay at the location the more data pads you want to retrieve, and you can sift your way through the mission critical items and the extra items of the things you want, load them up, get them out of the UGF onto your ship and away. So it's going to be all about how much players want to go for the extra bonus loot, whether it's worth the risk of staying if they are low on ammo or are being overwhelmed, or if they have enough friends to bring to them to the location, which versions of the mission that they do. So I think it's...
So clearly reputation is being used as a progression metric. That's what keeps coming back up.
This is give the players complete freedom of which side to take. You don't take a contract from Crusader asking for help, or from Ninetales wanting you to help them to take something.
In future, when we have reputation-based hostility and you can make friends with these guys, they will be your cover. So I can see plenty of exciting PvP action that's going to come from this mission.
So this is actually funny because this might be waiting for Reputation, the new version of it. This is a mission that we never actually got. You guys remember the barge heist? This was during an ISC where they showed us a bunch of different missions they were working on. It included the salvage missions. It included the Crusader Island missions and the contracts, but there was this one.
It's the barge that we use in Siege of Horizon, heavily modified, so there'll be lots of entrances and exits. What's great about using the barge is that we can put it anywhere on Crusader, you know, far away from the landing zones and anything that, you know, may cause performance to dip. So there should be no performance impacts.
We've placed a terminal, a cargo terminal inside.
I mean, maybe this isn't related to YouTube Reputation, but I think this is a huge holdup. I think Reputation is actually becoming like yet another holdup to our progressing gameplay in Star Citizen. Look at how basic the Reputation gates we're getting right now are. They're doing everything with Wicklow because they don't have other people to hold on to items we can get from Reputation, like Tisha Pacheco and Clovis Darnley and Recco Pataglia. They should all be giving us special ships because we've reached a certain level of reputation with them, right? That should be just one of the rewards we get as we're working up. They have these interesting custom ships at Teach's ship shop in Levski. They should be doing the same with different NPCs around here. And like they want to, but this system's holding them back. And we don't know why. I'm going to get to some monthly reports actually that come out this year. And it mentions Reputation V2, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's coming soon. Now listen to this. This is this is getting into some of the more new information as they changed from a company focused mainly on Star Citizen to a company focused almost entirely on Squadron 42 for a little while there. But the stuff that they were saying about Star Citizen's development were still consistent.
In different ways, they will be able to power up or down entities such as turrets, gates, and doors. And also,
this is talking about how engineering gameplay that we currently are getting in ships is going to be in space stations too. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Alter life support systems, and also this ties into security systems. So being able to power up or down certain sections of a security system. And security systems in turn will be dependent on security tokens that you will be able to grab from other NPCs in your environment to then gain access to other terminals, to security terminals or other areas.
We're here for this.
Reputation is a big topic for us, especially with Pyro. So reputation, what does it mean? It means that it's basically your...
Chat, does reputation change anything in Pyro right now? Like, does it make a difference? I don't actually know. I know that you can get reputation with headhunters and Citizens for Prosperity, but does that, besides their outposts attacking you, does the outpost actually attack you yet? I remember when Pyro was supposed to be like just a battleground of multiple gangs, and the different gangs would have different reputations and different space stations and outposts and stuff, man. Ugh, good Lord.
Standing your relationship with factions, and factions are the UEE in Stanton, or outlaw gangs, especially now in Pyro. And this will define your play style within this environment. So it will define how you experience the location that you're in a more social context or in a more combative context. So We talk about reputation gates as well, especially in the later presentations. So in the case of the food court, in the rundown station, we have multiple floors. So the first floor is the gang floor, and that might require you to have a better relationship with the owner of this location.
That'd be cool.
Which then will give you unique mission givers that you can go to and accept a mission that are offering you missions themed after the faction or the owner of this location, but also give you access to unique gear, collectibles, ship weapons, and items. You might have seen these locations in the demo if you've played it. So to close this all off and move on to the other presentations.
Okay. So that's like a look into the newer version of Reputation that they're talking about. Kind of how it gives you access to certain locations, but they come back to it later on in this presentation. And they go over kind of actually this is a pretty big moment in terms of explaining Reputation. Tell me how you think they've done on implementing this.
Khan touched on reputation earlier. Let's see how that is applied to the stations. So how does the reputation gate in the entry deck affect gameplay? What happens if we have good reputation? So if you had good reputation, you could go straight through. This is no fuss, and it's the quickest way to maneuver through the station. However, you've got to put the time and the effort in to get to this point. What happens if you neutral reputation? So you might be waved through, maybe you have to pay a bribe, and you don't want to pay, so you're going to have to find an alternate pathing. Or you're going to have to build up your reputation. If you have bad reputation, and for all you naughty ones out there, I know some of you exist, this applies to you. In short, you're going to have a tough time, but you have options. So stealth via other pathways might be one of those options. You build your reputation up from scratch, or you could probably fight. Let's focus on those alternate pathways. The modules in the station are broken up into several traversal areas.
Okay. So that kind of explained it, right? You get to a space station owned by a certain faction. That faction does not like you. You either need to find a new way in, pay a bribe, or fight your way in.
Wow.
As of right now, to be honest, I think I've had more glitches that cause these guys to shoot me at these locations than anything. But that's definitely not happened yet. Now, this could be linked to Reputation V2. Absolutely. We don't really know yet. But they were talking about this as hostility and reputation at this time, November 2nd, 2023. So you jump forward a little bit more to an Inside Star Citizen where they were talking just a bit more about this in detail.
It's not just lots of people wandering around.
With Pyro being an unlawful system, a lot of people have been experiencing spawn camping, ganking, however you want to phrase it. It's not fun, but it is a part of being in an unlawful system. There are a few sort of key puzzle pieces we are missing to sort of have the intended experience there, which are, we need AI to be there and we need them to be reactive so they can see what you're doing and be able to help the players who are just trying to get out.
Now that just happened, and I totally get that if they needed the AI to actually be working and functioning first, then getting the AI combat fixes that they're working on getting for 4.5 in, and actually having them run well, which didn't happen until after server meshing, were prerequisites. So I understand if those things were holding you up. I do.
We also need reputation.
Reputation really matters. You don't have the UEE doing any kind of patrols.
If someone is sat there ganking people coming out, it get to the point where Rough and Ready are that sick in you, you're not allowed at their stations anymore. You're not allowed to refuel there, land there, rearm. You go anywhere near it and they will shoot you down.
You can gain and lose reputation with the gangs, and they own various locations.
Are you going to be able to go to this station because you've destroyed an entire settlement where Rough and Ready work? You know, you kill this person. How's that going to affect your long-term reputation?
What you do really impacts where you can go and people's response to you.
Okay. Again, being reiterated that you're supposed to get these consequences for what you've done to these factions because they are the ones who control whatever it is that's going on in that part of the game. So moving forward a little bit from here, we have some real nice like elevator style music here. Let me know if that gets too loud. We have a roadmap roundup from March of 2024. That's that same year, detailing the reputation changes that were coming in with 4.0. Just to confirm, let's jump forward to 4.0 here real quick and double check. So remeshing AI locations. So maybe it was 323 that it came in. EVA, yep, reputation hostility. Updating the reputation system so that players can affect their long-term reputation with in-game organizations via means outside of missions, such as reduction of reputation for killing a member of that faction. AI belonging to certain factions will react differently based on their reputation with you. Being an ally provides the player benefits, such as more generous friendly fire thresholds and providing medical aid. Being an enemy will mean harsher friendly fire thresholds and may result in attack on sight. Lawful organizations will not attack on sight as long as they're in a monitored zone, whereas unlawful factions will attack on sight no matter what. This is the foundation. See, that's kind of a big one. It's like, basically you're always going to be opposed by lawful factions, I guess, unless maybe you have the reputation that they talk about. This is the foundation for which allows players to become allies with in-world criminal factions and enables places like Rimhex to enforce their own law. So that is what the feature, at least, description says. Now, as you guys have said, it's not super noticeable, but then again, a lot of the features they've added during the 3.x era have not been. So we'll continue on with the expectations that this is the direction they're headed in. Another update, this one was from Xylo. He had just mentioned a little bit about the reputation. As we gear up for this update, we've been making some big changes behind the scenes to refactor the reputation UI. As part of this update, players will find that some elements of their reputation have been reset. This will impact faction reputation and may extend to some mission givers, but will not impact your progress towards the Overdrive initiative. While we strive to avoid wipes whenever we can, it's essential this time to prevent potential losses or issues stemming from the extensive changes in this patch. This just kind of confirms that they can wipe reputation separately from everything else if they want to, but also things were being done with them as recently as last year. So it's not completely forgotten cause. But then we jump forward 1 year to April of this year, where they give us a slightly different take on how reputation is supposed to happen. And I want to be clear, the other guys we were listening to were the gameplay folks. They were the designers, they were the coders, they were the managers that were in charge of the feature developing. These guys are narrative. They handle the lore, they handle the storytelling, and they handle the fluff text that makes up for this reputation. What they're saying here might not be indicative of the design intent of the feature, so much as it's kind of just explaining why the design is going in the direction it is. So I think that there's still plenty to be happy about with reputation here. I just think that this has made it a little bit confusing, but ultimately with the whole lead up to this, maybe it'll all make sense now that we've soaked in all this information. But I'll let them talk, and then we will talk about it ourselves.
Meyer, I thought better of you, man. Why can't we stay on the freedom fighters' side? Why don't you let us be the genocidal terrorists who want to just wholesale slaughter thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent people?
Yeah, I mean,
kind of answered your own question.
Yeah, the Frontier Fighters switching into a pure enemy faction. I know some people aligned with them and they wanted to keep working for them, but our idea was always to have them as an ongoing enemy faction for the rest of the story we're telling this year. And going forward, not every faction that you encounter in the game is going to be one that the players can actively work for. And there are these purely hostile factions, and we need them from gameplay reasons. Is that as the reputation system slowly evolves, we want a similar experience for players who always can arrive in a location and have someone to attack or who is attacking them without having to worry about how the reputation system is going to change how they behave or the dialogue lines, because there's a high cost with that. We do want to have some reputation-based gameplay where the player's alignment will affect the outcome or how they experience these things.
Yes.
But that's going to be much more controlled.
It has to be within reason.
Yeah.
It has to be within technical reason, has to be within feature reason, has to be within time, the amount of time that we can invest into creating different variations. I mean, everybody that's ever played a video game that has branching storylines know you can only have so many different branches and stuff. Otherwise, it just goes on.
Unlimited
and on,
branches.
It becomes impossible. I say that, and then Baldur's Gate 3 was like, hold my beer. Shout out to Baldur's Gate 3. But even there are limits, and that's like this. So it's limits in time, limits in technology, limits in functionality, and our own desires. I don't think we're not making a game where you can do absolutely every single thing in the universe. There's a game we learn every week, the game that we want to make. We evolve, Chris evolves, you guys evolve, we all have different ideas every week and whatever, and we start to think, this is the kind of game we want to make and stuff as we see players react and stuff like this. And
a lot more talk like this now that they're putting pen to paper and getting a lot of these systems actually designed and in the game than there used to be. And I'm here for it. It's disappointing whenever something maybe closes up a little bit in scale or scope, but I appreciate that they've gotten very comfortable now with being like, this is how it's going to be and this is what we have to do. Just be realistic and do it then, Good on them.
It's not to say that maybe someday down the road you're not going to be able to join space Nazis or whatnot. But at this moment, where we're at,
I don't say no.
That's my point. But at this moment, where we're at, it's like no, that's not something we're really looking for.
But again, going back to the sort of the conversation about the guilds that we outlined in sort of the Road to 1.0 thing, there's going to be a criminal guild. If you are looking for that type of underworld working for the dark side type, characters and interactions and factions and stuff like that, we have that. You will be able to work for those people. But
you can be criminals. You can be criminals. You can be pirates and things. It's just it's just a question of how far into depravity we look.
An early version of the reputation system had a lot more factions that you're working for. They were going to be very localized so that as you traveled from planet to planet, you were starting to build your reputation up. And it turned out like that level of complexity wasn't delivering on the experience that we wanted. So we kind of have...
I don't think we even got far enough to know that. I mean, maybe in their own simulations or something they did, but we never had a reputation system that made it feel like you were actually differentiating your experience based on the factions you were around. Factions only started mattering this year at the earliest.
Back so that the factions will ideally have larger differences from each other so that you're not just shuffling back and forth between 20 identical delivery companies. For 1.0, we want each, company that you work for to have its own vibe, its own voice, and those are going to be the ones, and for you to grow along with them from system to system. So a lot of the factions that we previously thought was going to be Pyro only or Stanton only are going to expand out into the other systems so you can have a continuous experience as you travel through the star system.
It's definitely a decrease in scale. And I understand that they're explaining legitimate reasons for needing to do that, but it is certainly a lot of people were into this kinds of things because they were like, wow, there are going to be a bunch of companies that I can have different things with, and the company, when they come out and they're like, yeah, we're going to do this great stuff and it's going to be cool. And then people are like, okay, that's great. That's cool. I can't wait. This is going to be great. I'm in. I'm signed up. And then 5 years later, they're like, listen, it's not really feasible. And you're like, well, I mean, okay, that's what the other companies told me. That's why I came to this company.
And so I think a part of that is kind of limiting who you're going to be able to grow that reputation with. We're going to have local factions and local people that you can still get paying jobs with and do small mission chains with, but you won't necessarily be earning a permanent reputation with them that's tracked and affects other people. So it's going to be a lot more focused and hopefully deliver a more in-depth experience for those factions that you do work with.
That's why it's a little bit confusing, because now my question is does that mean that if I run into a security guard that works for whoever the security person is, but they're at Hurston, are they going to shoot at me at Hurston? And I don't know. I feel like it just doesn't make it as sure. it doesn't make things as clear anymore. But let's continue on this back half.
PMC.
Okay, so Foxwell is out there now giving.
Shut the city down, so it's besieged before they would just shut the city. Will Orison be taken over?
We've had a lot of focus on the Pyro gangs recently. This person would like to ask if you plan to focus on each of the 4 Stanton corporations a little more and their stuff.
Sure.
No comment.
Okay. That's going to lead. I'm going to go right into the next question. We have introduced relatively recently, within the last 6 months.
I mean,
Foxwell.
everything's relative.
Yeah. Foxwell is now, this new. I guess they're a PMC. Is that how you would classify them?
I would call them a security company. I don't think they're solid enough to be a PMC.
Okay. So Foxwell is out there now giving missions. They seem to be taking some of the role that Crusader and Hurston Security would have in the past. Is that accurate? What's?
Yeah, it's part of our 1.0 alignment as we head towards that goal of, for the major landing zones, it was causing potential issues for players to be able to earn negative rep with these companies and seeing how, I worked for Crusader Security, I pissed them off, I attacked them. What does that mean for me accessing the content in Crusader now? And it had a lot of knock-on ramifications of, it was really complicating things, having the 4 corporations who control these planets also be reputation factions. So we're going to slowly start changing towards them being more local factions where you can work for them and earn money for them sometimes, but not necessarily keep a long-term reputation with them. Instead,
So that's the second time in this talk that he's kind of confirmed that there are factions that you can do missions for, but you can't earn a long-term rep for. So basically, the developers will always choose what our actual relationship is with these factions. So we can't necessarily make them angry at us, but we also don't always have all of their missions unlocked. I don't know about that. If that's true for just a very small amount of factions, that's one thing. But even with just the way that they were talking about this stuff back here, or not even, we don't even have to go back that far. We could just go back to the most recent talks like this, where they're talking about that faction and that control. They're going to fine you. They're going to make it harder for you to come in.
What happens if you neutral reputation? So you might be waved through. Maybe you have to pay a bribe and you don't want to pay, so you're going to have to find an alternate pathing. Or you're going to have to build up your reputation. If you have.
So how far does this push against the other one? Right here, they're saying this is about the local factions like Crusader and R-Corp, which it's a weird situation because there aren't very many systems or planets in Star Citizen that are owned by corporations. So this could be a weird situation because of the way that they are, but they could also say it's the same for all the planets in the system. I'm not really sure. It really feels like there should be some level of people being locked out of content because of the choices they've made. That Star Citizen has very much been trying to push consequences. You don't have VTOL thrusters, you can't fly as long in atmosphere. It's not something they said yet, but it's getting there. You don't have a second shield generator, you can't use any more shields. You got a ship with low armor, your components are taking damage faster. You wore a helmet that doesn't have a vacuum seal, you can't go outside. Oh, you don't have a high heat suit on? Don't go to aerial. Everything is about consequence and choice and all that. It would be weird for them to not have a reputation system that highlights the poor decisions you've made. And at the very least, maybe make the threshold for getting actually shot at by these factions really high, but at least give us a mission to get back into their good graces. I don't know, man. That's why, again, I lay all of this out so that you can hear it, listen to it as many times as you want, try to come to your own conclusions. I am legitimately a little bit confused as to what they're saying and what direction they're going in and to how much they want to scale this back. But my only hope is that we can find out next year. Now, I don't know if I can find any mentions of this, but the Reputation System V2 has been mentioned in some monthly reports over the last year. So it's something that's getting some light work done on it. But we don't, that doesn't ever really tell us anything these days. Here we go. October. Work progressed on the features shown at CitizenCon Direct. System-to-system hauling progressed well, with devs adding new missions that will require players to take items between star systems. These missions will expand the hauling career until Reputation V2 is implemented. It's like one of the few little mentions we get of this, and this is really the most recent news we've gotten on it, that Reputation V2 is still planned to be implemented, and it will have some mishmash of the different things talked about throughout these years, but with this talk throwing a little bit of cold water on it, I don't exactly know what to expect. I hope this has been a decent summary and it's let you know kind of where things are kind of headed, and we'll check back in on this in the new year when hopefully they start talking about it some more.